Congregation Kol Israel's Brooklyn Jewish Art Galleries project, Jewish ComicCon, the first ever. I want to thank...
Hello. Good morning. How do you start off with what might have been a great entertainment joke of a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew going into a shul? I don't know what the punchline is, but I know there's a lesson, and in these days and times where things are as off-center as could be, I'm so honored to be able to present this. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure, and I think I'm having a no coffee moment where I've just totally blanked out on all the names. So
I'm going to introduce everybody, don't worry.
If everybody could please just introduce themselves. I'm just humbled. Thank you, welcome. And I know Darren.
That's joy.
No problem.
Welcome to the inaugural panel at the very first Jewish ComicCon. Where else? In Brooklyn, New York. Total, we're not in San Diego anymore. Our topic is Heroes in Faith, a discussion of the intersection of religion and comics as it impacts entertainment creation and careers. I'm your moderator, Jordan B. Gorfinkel, Gorf, which is frog backwards, and now you won't forget it. And I'm going to set the bar pretty high right now from the start with our esteemed panel of guests that I am so honored to introduce to you now. Sitting immediately to my left is Darren Vincenzo, veteran of comic book editing, production, and talent management. His work at DC Comics involved nearly all the Batman family of comic books, including the Eisner Award-winning Batman Gotham Adventures, based on the animated Batman TV series, and Detective Comics, the company's flagship title. He rebooted Green Arrow and helped create the hero's son, Connor Hawke, who was recently featured on DC's Legends of Tomorrow TV series on the CW. In addition, he has written numerous comic book stories featuring Batman, Superman, Supergirl, Green Arrow, and Steel. Utilizing skills honed as an artist and editor, Darren became a talent developer and manager, as well as a new talent scout at Space Goat Productions, cultivating the skills and nurturing the careers of artists across all the major American comic book companies. But I know him best as my office mate, Dottie! Please welcome Darren Vincenzo.
It never sounded so good. Unbelievable. I've accomplished all that in my life.
Or looked so good. Best served the convention, right? You're supposed to applaud that for me. I know it's early, the coffee today is starting to flow. Don't worry, I'll cue you, I'll let you know what to do. Rabbi Cary Friedman is the author of 6 books, including Wisdom from the Batcave, which was the inspiration for the 2014 documentary Legends of the Night. He appeared on the History Channel's Batman Unmasked, The Psychology of the Dark Knight. He is a founder of the Center of Tactical Resilience and Ethical Policing, a consultant to the Behavioral Science Unit of the FBI, and addresses law enforcement audiences across the USA. Truly, he is a real-life Jewish superhero.
I don't sound so impressive anymore, do I?
Rabbi Friedman earned a master's degree from Columbia University and rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University. He was executive director of the Duke University Jewish Learning Experience and a chaplain at the federal prison in Butner, am I pronouncing that correctly? Butner, North Carolina. Please welcome Rabbi Cary Friedman. Dr. Debbie Almontaser is an award-winning writer, educator, speaker, and specialist on Islam and cultural and religious diversity. Her myriad accomplishments include being the founding and former principal of, I didn't check this with you before, I'm going to make sure I get it right, Khalil Gibran International Academy, and a 25-year veteran of the NYC public school system, board president of the Muslim Community Network, for which she frequently lectures on Arab culture, Islam, culture diversity, interfaith coalition building, and youth leadership. She sits on the Public Advocate Tish James Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh Task Force to Combat Hate, and also serves on the boards of the Therapy and Learning Center Preschool, Emerge USA Foundation, and the American Muslim Women PAC. She was profiled in the New York Times, Time Magazine, Newsweek, and the Daily News for spearheading the inauguration of New York City's Arab Heritage Week in 2005. And most recently, and I think this is so cool, she was a featured speaker at the 2016 National Democratic Convention. Please give a hearty shalom to Dr. Debbie Almontaser. So honored to have you. Thank you. And Sholly Fisch, all the way to the right, I do not have a written introduction for, so I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Well, see, that's appropriate because basically I've been writing comics for 30 years and everybody still says poo. By day, I work on lots of educational TV shows for kids, including a whole lot that you guys probably watched when you were little. Sesame Street, Cyber Chase, all kinds of stuff.
Sing with us. Sunny days. Okay, go ahead.
Late at night, whenever, when criminals are prowling the streets, that's when I'm writing comic books. If you know any of them, it's probably the Batman Brave and Bold series I did a few years ago, or the backup stories that I did for Grant Morrison's Action Comics. Nowadays, it's things like Scooby-Doo Team Up, Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo Regular, Teen Titans Go, and whatever they'll pay me money for.
Sholly Fisch. And as for myself, I was part of the Bat Guys editorial team at DC Comics, where I created Batman No Man's Land, which ran through all the Batman continuity titles for 1 year, and served as the inspiration for the Dark Knight Rises feature film, in addition to debuting Harley Quinn in continuity Batman comics. And Birds of Prey, which was a TV series, and has been featured on several others, most recently the CW's Arrow, and, by the way, Birds of Prey is rumored to be in development as a feature film. Presently, I apply my comic skills to working with corporations, not-for-profits, and entertainment companies that want to develop visual storytelling to achieve their objectives. I'm the creator of JewishCartoon.com, the weekly comic strip featured in the New York Jewish Week, and newspapers across the nation, and of course, online. And I lead the Jewish Cartoon Workshop. You can learn more about that and get previews of my work upstairs after this panel. And let me just hit a few highlights here. Upcoming projects: Michael Midas Champion, about a superhero who must prioritize family over work to save the world. 3 O'Clock Club with Butch Hartman, the superstar creator producer of the hit Nickelodeon show Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom. That's a new comic book series from Lion Forge Comics. And the forthcoming Passover Haggadah graphic novel. Passover Haggadah graphic novel. I'm Jordan B. Gorfinkel, Gorf, and this is Heroes and Faith. All right, game on. Here we go. Starting with Debbie, going to Darren, and then Rabbi Cary. In 30 seconds or less, can you please identify your religion and summarize it? That's what we call in our industry the elevator pitch, or in this building, the very steep stairwell pitch.
Well, I would have hoped you would have started with Judaism and then Christianity and Islam, because Islam is basically an offspring of the two. Does that help?
We can go, you know what, let's go in reverse order, then we'll come back to you. I think you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
I hate that idea. I'm so happy.
Go ahead.
I'm an Orthodox Jew, and what I would tell you is that all of us, we can trace ourselves back to Abraham. Everyone's going to talk about that common lineage. But as an Orthodox Jew, what defines how I live my life, there was that revelation as a creator, and there was a moment of revelation at Mount Sinai. The Torah was given to us. There's a system of mitzvot, about 613 bajillion of them, that we're obligated to keep, and there's a system of halakha that governs my observance, the way that I live my life every day, and that's pretty much what I believe.
Moving right along 1,000 years or so to Christianity.
Yes, well, as everyone knows, Christianity started as, part of the Jewish tradition. I mean, we split off, of course, when Jesus entered the world, and then some of us kind of went off in a different direction, and that's obviously the name Christian. We follow Jesus Christ and, use his guidelines and his teachings and his example to do our best to make the world a better place and look ahead to the next one. So hopefully that summarized it well enough.
Great.
Awesome. So just piggybacking, maybe that's not a kosher term right now.
It's not halal either.
It's not halal either. So Islam actually is, as I mentioned earlier, an offspring of Judaism and Christianity. Islam is a compilation of the teachings of the prophet Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Adam, Noah, all of those amazing people and heroes that are a part of our history. Islam came about through revelations to the prophet Muhammad from Angel Gabriel. I think we all believe in Angel Gabriel, who basically shared with him verses for the Quran, which then became the holy book of the Muslim faith. And all of the stories that are within the Quran are a compilation of all of the different prophets that I mentioned earlier. So the person that I believe is mentioned most is actually Prophet Moses. A lot of the teaching of his time and the struggle of the people of Israel is mentioned in there. And so we believe in one God. There is no Trinity, unfortunately. We revere Jesus as one of the most revered prophets as well, and we celebrate Mary. Mary is the most highly regarded woman in Islam.
Hang on to the microphone. I'm going to grab this one over here.
All right.
You know what? Let's trade because I think this one's a little shorter. Thank you. Don't cross the streams.
Okay. Try that one.
Right. We'll try to make as many pop cultural references as possible here. So, Debbie, let's define some terms here.
Sure.
Can you please define faith? And these days, why the euphemism? Why can't we just come out and call it what it is? Religion.
Is this thing working? Yeah. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, good. Well, it's working now, right? Okay. Well, for me, faith is a spiritual connection that you, as an individual, have.
If you're feedback,
Yeah,
it's okay.
that's
This one.
That you, as an individual, have with a spiritual, supreme being, whether it's God, whether it's Buddha, whether it's any entity that you aspire to. So I think that, I don't see any difference between faith and religion, and I wonder why people want to have two separations, and not see them as one. And I think what defines us as individuals is how much we choose to be faithful or religious. And that's okay. If you choose to be, faithful and religious, that's great. If you choose not to, that's also your, prerogative. In Islam, there is no compulsion in religion, so you can't force anybody to be Muslim, or to become Muslim, or to be Muslim. So does that help?
Yes, very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Trying to keep in our time segment.
No, you're good. Right. Don't feel any pressure. I'm learning so much from everything you're saying, and we've just begun. Carrie, do you want to address the same question? What's faith? And what's the difference, or perhaps the overlap between faith and religion?
So I kind of hate all these words. I'll tell you why. The word faith, and I'm not a linguist and I'm not a scholar, so to make some kind of distinction between faith and religion, I kind of don't get it. What makes me nervous about the words, makes me uncomfortable, is that there's a certain sense of almost a compartmentalization. Anything that goes towards doing that splits off parts of our life into different components, that there's the religious part and then there's the secular or the mundane or the something which isn't. I don't like that. Religion, I tend to think of, like, when I hear those, a lot of it ends up being very much like in a head or belief or something. In Judaism, certainly we don't emphasize, certainly we have our beliefs, there are various formulations, there's codifications, Maimonides, 13 principles of faith, those are certain basic defining truths that define the Jewish religion, and we have those with discussions of all that kind of stuff, but the focus is always on action, the way we live our lives. As I mentioned before, the system of halakha, the mitzvot that we have, that govern, Jewish law governs everything about all the actions we do, how I conduct my business, how I drive around in my car, I go shopping, I use the ATM machine, I interact with my family, whatever I do, there's that system of the actions that go towards, the actions have the effect of ennobling a person's character, their soul, and making something different. So when we talk about faith, I don't like that word because it's like, oh, what I believe. It's what I believe and it's what I do. Anything that tries to strip those or break them up, I'm not too keen on.
Very quickly, do you define or translate for us the word halacha and the word mitzvah?
No. No, I can't. Are you kidding? That's a child's play. Mitzvah is well, usually translated as a commandment. There are 613 mitzvot. The word mitzvah in Hebrew comes from the word, what it really means is to connect. There are various ways that we connect with the Creator, with the Almighty. He's the Creator and He's the Almighty, He's the leader. Like He's evolved and He wants a connection with us. We connect via those 613 different mitzvot, those commandments, those ways of interacting. Halacha literally means to go, the way to go. Halacha describes the system of Jewish law that governs everything. There are details that govern everything. And halacha means that everything that I do, everything that we do in our lives, every detail, how we tie our shoes, how we do anything, is imbued with significance, with religious significance. The Almighty has commanded us how to do that. So halacha literally means the way to go.
Sholly Fisch, what's a hero?
Oh, see, now I just figured out what faith is. Okay, so, and actually they kind of go hand in hand. To me, a hero is somebody who does what needs to be done regardless of the personal cost, and who tries to be better and help other people be better. You know, so when I was doing those backups in Action Comics with Superman, you know, I did an awful lot of thinking about Superman at that time. And, you know, for years there's been this whole argument of, is he Superman and he's pretending to be Clark Kent, or is he Clark Kent and he's pretending to be Superman? And I came to the conclusion that it's neither, because he's both of them. You know, and in both roles he's trying to do the exact same thing, which is help other people. You know, and when he's Clark Kent, he's writing, you know, crusading stories and, you know, or even just, you know, helping his neighbor or whatever it is. When he's Superman, he's helping people on a different scale in his underwear. But, you know, in both cases, he's a hero. And he's inspiring other people and inspiring them to do better. You know, and that is very much wrapped up in faith. And it is also very much wrapped up in religion, although I think, you know, in all of these religions, there's always the distinction of saying, we recognize that we have heroes, and we have heroes who are human, but then we also have God who's above that, and we try not to confuse the two. So.
When I was a kid, superhero readers could be divided into two camps, DC fans and Marvel fans. DC Comics characters were clearly delineated as good and evil, and never the twain shall meet, whereas Marvel characters had shades of gray, combining virtues and flaws. Going down the road quickly, starting with Sholly, tell me, which are you? A Marvel person or a DC person? And how did your faith influence your superhero orientation?
All right. So, at this point, we should turn off all the recording devices.
Right, answer carefully because you never may be hired again.
Exactly. I have worked for both companies. I started at Marvel, I work for DC now. They're both great companies, they're both wonderful people, they both have great characters.
All right.
I always grew up a DC fan. I enjoyed Marvel, but Justice League, Teen Titans, you know, and then later Captain Marvel, Plastic Man, and Batman, of course. You know, I was born in the early 60s, so I was the right age for Batmania when the Batman TV show hit. And I slept in my Batman pajamas, and I collected my Batman cards, and I built my Batman plastic models, and I did all of that junk. So I was you know, and so when I grew up and actually got to work for those guys, so it was great. How did my faith play into that? I mean, in the most general sense, I mean, superheroes, as the rabbi said upstairs before, superheroes are all about this stuff, right? They're all about being good, you know, good and evil. They're all about trying to be the best you can be. They're all about helping others. You know, it all comes from those same roots. So.
Would you like to address it?
DC. I hope that was recorded. Is that recorded? I don't want there to be any confusion. I don't know if I was clear enough just now. DC. So, yeah, I love DC Comics. The other guys, I mean, thank goodness they did Conan the Barbarian at one point. But otherwise, it's a pretty useless. So the DC Comics, what I like especially for kids. I think that this is what formed my basic way of looking at the world. That notion that there's good and there's evil, and there's a choice in the world. The Torah, God says to us in the Torah, He says, I place before you today a blessing, a curse, life and death. The choices, the options are pretty stark. It doesn't say, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of morally ambiguous, really grave, vague kinds of areas, and then you can kind of work through without any clarity and stumble through. It doesn't say that. What the verse says is, you have to choose. You have to choose between good and evil, life and death. The contrast is very stark. Now, life gives us a whole bunch of situations that are very, very complex. There's no question about it. But I think that at the core, if a person makes a decision, like a kid, imagine training a kid. My wife and I, that's what we did with our kids. We indoctrinated 6 brainwashed kids with the Batman. I have a kid here in the room who is, I'm not going to point her out because she'd be embarrassed, but we told them about the Batman, the values, and good and evil. They have a whole lifetime, for 120 years, God willing, to understand about the complexities and the subtleties, the nuances of life. But let them start in a foundation where they say, I choose life, I choose blessing, I choose good. And then let them go out and confront that kind of a world.
Just one technical note. This is a small room, so as people are joining us in the back, we welcome you. Please try to take your bagels quietly. And also, any talking in the back carries forward a lot, so if you can, please try to remain silent. If you need to talk, I feel like a synagogue president, which is appropriate given the setting. If you need to talk, please step outside. Thank you. Darren Vincenzo, same question.
Well, as far as growing up a Marvel or DC fan, actually I had friends who were diehard Marvel fans and did not pick up anything about Marvel. My younger brother, who actually happens to be a Catholic priest, and I grew up big comic fans, and we read virtually every superhero comic that we could get our hands on. So we liked equally Marvel and DC, believe it or not. We had, each of us had our 2 or 3 favorite Marvel characters and our 2 or 3 favorite DC characters. But we bought and read everything we could get our hands on. So, and as far as how that influenced us, I think, Debbie was talking about, I guess a number of panelists were talking about faith and religion. And even though those words these days, I think, have a negative connotation to the general public. Our culture does not put much importance on faith or religion, and in fact, there's a negative connotation to those things, I think, in our culture today. But if you boil down, most people of faith, most people who observe religion, you can really boil down, what it is that they try to do, what it is that they see in their faith and in their religion, and it is to do good, to make the world a better place, to follow the teachings of whomever, but to follow those teachings to improve their lives and the lives of everyone around them. And there's not enough of that in the world, I don't think, these days. But to me, as a kid, and certainly as an adult, comics embody that, especially when we were kids. These days, there are a lot of heroes that are kind of morally ambiguous, but in the old days, heroes were the good guys. The superheroes were there to save lives, to defeat evil, to stop bad things from happening to people. And that's, we as people of faith, people who observe religion, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to defeat the forces of evil. If it just means helping the poor or, just improving society, watching out for others. That's really boiled down all of our religions up here, and that's what it's about. We follow, we believe in God, and we follow the teachings of God and of, those He sent to us to give us messages on how to treat people better. And I think, comics very much do that and have always done that, in my opinion. So, there it is.
Debbie, as you answer the question, can you also talk about the comics or the comics characters? You're a scholar on Islam and an extremely accomplished social action activist, but you're also a fangirl. So talk a little bit about, it's true. I talked to her on the phone before, so I've established this clearly. So can you talk also about how the answer to the question relates to you, to the comics and characters that you love?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to be on this panel, you have no idea. So, so number one, I'm not going to choose of either or, Marvel or DC, and I'll tell you why, because the two joined forces and helped create the 99. How many of you have heard of the comic book series, the 99? Okay, woohoo! So the comic book series, the 99, is actually the attributes of God. In Islam, there are 99 attributes to God. These are names, and there's 101 which has yet to be revealed to man. And so a dear friend of mine, who's actually a psychologist, studied here in the United States, realized when he moved to the Muslim world to do a lot of psychological work with children, with youth, with adults, that they needed some kind of heroic spiritual connection. And he too was a Marvel fan and a DC fan, and came up with the idea of creating the 99. And what he did was he learned through the two companies of what their origins are. And when I personally, in my own research, looked at the historical, story of Superman, I got goosebumps when I learned that it was two Jewish American boys out west who were sitting in their room and who just drew this figure as being somebody who can be a savior and a superhero. And that story gives me goosebumps every time that I tell it. It's so amazing, because we as human beings look for, inspiration, and we look, for it through our spiritual connection and through, our, through our holy books and what have you. So for me, each and every one of the prophets that walked this life is a superhero. They did something to make the world a better place, and they left a legacy for us to, to look to and to be inspired. So, so my favorite superhero is actually Wonder Woman, and I have my Wonder Woman boots on today. And the most comfortable boots and warm, and I feel so cozy and really good.
I have my Batman socks on.
All right.
I have my Spidey underwear. Too much?
So, and more recently, Marvel actually created Kamala Miss Marvel, which actually is about an American Muslim Pakistani girl in New Jersey who by day is a teenager and by night fighting crime.
Just like all my children. Before I allow you to give up the mic, I'm now going to ask some slightly tough questions, so you'll forgive me. I want to discuss openly identifying versus concealing your faith. The comics industry, like Hollywood entertainment at large, is a fairly inclusive, multicultural business. Nevertheless, I've had discussions with observant Jews in the industry who advise not wearing one's faith on one's sleeve or on one's head, as the case might be. Back in the day, Stan Lee Lieber felt he needed to rename himself Stan Lee to be in the business. And there are many name change examples across the entertainment industry, in the movie industry, just to name one. And it's not just with Jews. By contrast, I have a strong memory of Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, two people who converted openly and proudly. Debbie, historically, has there been more acceptance of Muslims in entertainment, or is it just that my selective memory is highlighting athletes that no one in their right mind is going to pick a fight with?
Exactly the latter. Nobody wants to pick a fight with Muhammad Ali. He's the greatest, right? And then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he'll just step on you. It's been really, really difficult for American Muslims to actually break the glass ceiling, if I may use that term, in the entertainment industry. And sadly, for the most part, many are asked to actually play the terrorist in a movie. So those are the most, widely available that people can actually get casted for. And I have a couple of friends who are actually actors, and they had to begin that way until they, got name recognition and have been able to move forward. But I believe that there is hope, for the American Muslim community to actually be able to do more. I don't know how many of you a couple of years ago saw the All American Muslims, which was a TLC reality show. I think it was 2013. And it was on for a series, but the whole world went crazy. They boycotted some of the TLC advertisers. People were not happy to have such a show. But it was one of the most incredible opportunities to help America, see American Muslims from a different light. So what it really requires is also courage of companies in the entertainment industry to really say, you know what, we're going to do this. So for example, one of the things that I had the great opportunity to do is work with Nick Jr. And they wanted to do a Muslim American series, kids series. And it finally came to fruition. So, you have Dora, and you have Little Bill, and now you have, I'm forgetting his name, it's a little Pakistani boy, and it's a show on Nick Jr. So slowly but surely we're getting there.
All right, so as far as, look, I do educational TV and comic books. So educational TV is all very multicultural, and nobody has ever hassled me in any way, shape, or form. Same thing is true for comics. There have been times when I missed out on doing a series for DC because I had to do a meeting right away, and that day was a holiday, and I said, can't come in, sorry. When Raven Bold got nominated for an Eisner Award, I did not go because the ceremony was Friday night, and I decided it was more important that my kids know that Shabbat's more important. But what's really been interesting is every once in a while I've done a comic where I've actually put some explicit religious stuff in the comic, and in mainstream comics. And seeing how people react is really interesting. So, take for example, there was a time when I was in one of the Superman stories that I did in action. I did a story about Mom and Pop Kent and all their trouble having a baby for years and years because I figured let's show why they're such good parents. And so at one point in the story, they're really, they've been through in vitro fertilization, they've been through hormone treatments, and they go to their priest and say basically, why is God punishing us? And he comforts them with a quote from Shmuel, first book of Samuel, and says, all these people in the Bible had a really hard time having kids for a really long time, and I don't know why God is doing this, but I know he has a plan, and with people like you, I'm sure it's not a punishment, it's because he has something wonderful in store for you. And so, looking online at the reactions to the story, there were the people, like the religious people of whatever faith they were, saying, oh my God, here's a priest who's actually not a child molester or a murderer. And then there were the other people, like the atheist people who, some of them reacted very strongly to it. And I remember there was one in particular, one guy said, oh, this is terrible because this is so unrealistic to tell them that, that there's something wonderful in store for them. And then somebody else responded on the message board and said to me, as opposed to a guy coming from another planet and having superpowers? So you have fundamentalists on both sides. It's very interesting to look at the fundamentalist atheists who have as much trouble, understanding and accepting people who are religious as there are people on the religious side who have trouble understanding and accepting atheists. So everybody does what works for them, and everybody reacts depending on where they're coming from.
Cary Friedman, which religion does comics love more, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam?
We have some technical difficulties because that's not the answer. You're supposed to give it.
And which religion does comics hate on more?
Okay.
I was going to give you both. That's
that's awesome. Okay, fine.
Things going.
Right.
I think in general, what I have seen is that religion, I think you mentioned this before, just in our society, people are nervous about it. I have seen people who are not religious at all, and I've heard them describe and discuss topics like evolution, I think that would be religious fanaticism and zeal that I wish I possessed in my worship of God. So I think that's always there's a kind of a tragic irony in that As soon as a person says, as soon as I identify myself as being religious, or then they're like, oh, we know how, you're just crazy. But they hold on to beliefs, even without, whatever basis for evidence or anything. They just, they believe what they believe. So I'm not sure I could identify which one they like more or more. I think in general they tend to be somewhat nervous about the topic completely. What I have seen though in our society is that it's always open season on Christianity. If you have, I don't think anybody would be willing. I think whether it's Islam or Judaism, those have a certain, a little tender to touch that because there's certain volatile kind of things, and sometimes a lot of the creators, let's say in the comic industry, are Jews, so they think they're talking about Jewish values, when a lot of times those are not Jewish values. But I think it's always kind of safe to make fun of Christian white men, because that's, have you noticed that?
Definitely.
Right? I mean, there's something about that which, people say, well, they've been in control, but it's like, I shouldn't make fun of anybody, but that's sort of because they don't seem to respond in kind of angry, militant kind of ways. They just kind of smile and move on. So I have certainly seen that, I don't know if it's comics specifically, but across the entertainment industry, they're the ones who are, it seems to be open season on that.
You want to address this, please?
Yeah, I'll take that next.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I myself am Catholic. I'm probably what you consider a liberal Catholic. I'm not an extremely conservative Catholic. But there, of course, are evangelicals, and there are Christian denominations that are somewhat fanatical in their beliefs and in their desire to force their beliefs onto other people. That has been the case for many, many years in our country, and I think that people who are opposed to that have kind of picked up on that as, okay, it's easy to make them villains, to make fanatical Christians as villains, just as, in more modern times or more recent years, to make Islamic, Muslims fanatic, the fanatic villains in the stories and in the movies. I mean, it's something that society kind of picks up on, and they want, they're drawn to that. They, writers and creators and people who make movies, they know that that's kind of what the public is looking for. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that falls back to, or goes back to what our society as a whole is kind of interested in. We're not, generally, I mean, I know there are a lot of feel-good stories on the internet, and of course people like to read feel-good stories, but what people really want is they want to read stories about, villains, or about bad people, or about horrible things happening. It's like that, train wreck where, people, they want to hear stories about people doing bad things to other people. And I think, of course, in fiction, conflict is at the center of, any good story. So when you're trying to come up with conflict, you have to come up with villains and things for the heroes and the good people to fight. So they cast around and they find, what's in the news, or they find what's popular to, people that are popular to vilify that particular year. And so that's how those stories kind of continue to be told and become part of our society. I guess I'm done.
Just share a quick story with you. I come from this backwards, because I wrote the Batman book as propaganda. I was teaching Torah. I was the rabbi at Duke University, and the kids did not have any interest in hearing what I had to say in my Torah classes. So what I started to do was to introduce it with a Batman, some episode. I passed out a story, like a panel. We would discuss whatever the ethical problem in whatever the dilemma was. They'd start they'd start arguing, all the kids, and then I would, put a page of Talmud or something, some primary source, and say, here's the conversation going on, a little bit more profoundly, and these kids were into it. It worked, and so I put that together. Those are about 18 intros to various classes that I gave. I went to DC Comics, and I went to this guy first. And he passed me along to someone, passed on to somebody, and it took me 7 years to put the thing out, because the legal department there tortured me, and they were absolutely right. But what they said to me was, there's all kinds of books that come out that are the gospel according to Superman and the this and that, and they said, we don't want that kind of connection, we don't want that, we don't want that. So I had to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, and it was 7 years. It was the longest 7 years of my life. But I respect what they were doing, but they said, we do not have any kind of overlap with our stuff and anything identifiably religious. So that is a sterilized version of the original one. You know, I respect what they did. I am very, very grateful the way it worked out. But I did get a kick out of that in a horrible, not getting a kick out of it kind of way.
By the way, Jacob had to wait 7 years for each of his wives. So I want to ask a quick follow-up question, which is obviously, does faith help or hurt a career in comics? Darren?
That's a very good question. One thing, I was just tapping Gorf, I wanted to bring something up while it was on my mind. Cary mentioned, coming to Gorf. I mean, obviously Gorf and I were on staff at DC Comics, so unlike some of the creators up here, we made decisions that affected whether certain stories were published and whether, certain religious elements made it into stories. And I know, at least at one time, and I know we've had this discussion before, but I know there was a time when there really was an editorial, not a mandate, but kind of an editorial feeling that as soon as you tie a character to a religion, or you start to have a character identify with a certain religion, you're going to lose a segment of your readership. You're definitely going to have, if you talk about a character being a Christian and really show a lot of Christian elements, all of a sudden, anyone who is not Christian and someone who is, Jewish or whatever, they might then shy away from that character for whatever reason. Maybe they have an objection, or maybe they just, they can't identify with that character anymore. So, I'm sure years and years ago, I mean, well before our time in comics, there probably was definitely a conscious decision not to show too much religion, again, because you didn't want to alienate certain readers. Nowadays it's not frowned on quite as much. I mean, you're after certain readership, so you want to introduce, Muslim characters and Jewish characters and bisexual characters and all these other things that we now see in comics to bring in those other readers. But that's definitely something that I know we discussed and I know we encountered when we were at DC Comics, as far as making those decisions, consciously not to introduce some of those elements so that you wouldn't push people away. So,
I'm sorry for reaching for the mic, but you brought 3 or 4 stories in my head, so I'll take off my moderator yarmulke for a second and put on my panelist yarmulke. It's interesting. Comics to me is the best medium for telling stories because it's one of the only visual media in which one person can communicate an idea clearly through the organic combination of words and pictures, which is something that I teach my students when I do the cartoon workshop. And it's interesting to me that comics is something that everybody can do. It doesn't matter if you can draw. As long as you can do a stick figure, as long as you can write words on a page, and as long as you can tell a story, which all of us can do, you can do comics. Therefore, I think comics are at the forefront of reflecting society of all the different media. And in the beginning, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. In the beginning, we were reflecting the immigrant experience. And I know Danny Fingeroff and Ari Chaplain are going to touch on this a lot more later on, so I'm not going to get into it in great depth right now. Please look forward to those wonderful panels that will be following ours. Nowadays, then in the 70s or so, we had those great Green Lantern stories or Green Arrow stories with what was that wonderful quote where an elderly African-American accosts Green Lantern and says, "You're the space cop and you help the purple people and the green man and the blue woman, what about the black man?" So we were using science fiction, as Star Trek did so well, to reflect society. And nowadays, it's about multiculturalism. So we see characters that are wearing their faith on their skin and their costume. They're very out about it. I had a case on Batman where one of our writers had Nightwing. I saw somebody before wearing a Nightwing t-shirt over here. Nightwing, the former Robin, Dick Grayson, ordering a pizza in the Batcave, which is a funny idea right there. What address do you give? But anyway, so he ordered a pepperoni pizza, and I actually objected to it because I said, there are people whose religious dietary restrictions would not allow them to eat pepperoni on a pizza. And that means that if he eats pepperoni pizza, I can't be that character. And these characters are meant to be, these superheroes are meant to be aspirational. And we did change it. Nowadays, I don't think I would make that argument because I think that we adhere to more specificity in characters, and the characters are stronger for it. Another example, in terms of the part of the question about how does faith affect a career in the entertainment industry, when I was, finally, anointed to the editorial team of DC Comics, and it was a great honor, but I went to Paul Levitz, who at the time was the president of the company, and I said, we may have an issue because I know part of my responsibilities as being an editor of the Batman comics is going to be to go to comic book conventions, and as Sholly mentioned, I can't attend them over Shabbat, which takes place from sundown on Friday night to sundown on Saturday night. And Paul Levitz, to his immense credit, who reflected the corporate culture of DC Comics and Time Warner, said, don't worry about it. We will cross that bridge when we get to it. And to me, that was a lesson that comics bring all these ideas together. Comics is the simplest and most basic and on the forefront medium for telling stories. And therefore, it is also the greatest bridge to connect different cultures, religions, and races. And now I'm going to say something that's a little off color. You'll forgive me, but I've been thinking it for a while, and I think in this setting it's appropriate. There's a trend, I want to say it's almost a stereotype, but I don't want to say that, where with immigration, first the Jews come in, then the blacks come in, then the Asians come in. In comics, it's been the same thing. First the Jews came in, then the blacks came in, then the Asians came in. We have Jim Lee running DC Comics now, which is fantastic. Why? You know, stereotypes can also be truisms. Because it's the immigrant experience. It's the tolerance that we all want to embrace. Comics is the way, and superheroes, but comics at large. This is a comic book convention, but we're going to be talking about indies and everything else as well. Comics is the way that we approach feeling a part of this culture, and particularly in this political atmosphere after all we've gone through, I'm glad to have my superheroes. Done?
So, let's have one more thought, and maybe we'll take a few questions, and then, you know, if each panel runs 5 or 10 minutes over, we'll be here till tomorrow, and then we don't get fired.
No, it's good. It's just, you know, you brought to mind something that's really kind of interesting to me in retrospect. But you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, the Jews and the blacks and the Asians, in terms of the people who make comics. But in terms of the comic book characters themselves, you know, having grown up during this period, there were no Jewish characters till long after there were black and Hispanic characters. And then it took till relatively recently to get Muslim characters. But what I didn't realize at the time, and I only thought about it many, many years later, so in the early 70s, I was really, really into black superheroes. Luke Cage, Black Lightning, Black Goliath, and I thought these guys were really cool. And at the time, I just thought it was because I really liked the characters, and I do, and you know, I still do. But in retrospect, I realized it's because they were the only ones who weren't exactly the same white people as everybody else, you know? And so because there was nobody who was like me, I was looking at the characters who were different, you know? And so I'm thrilled that nowadays we live in a world where we have Asian heroes, we have Muslim heroes, we have identifiably Jewish heroes, we have all of this stuff. Because I think it's a lot healthier, you know, for the sake of all those readers out there who are reading it. Not that I don't like Luke Cage, I still like Luke Cage.
So one last question for Debbie for 1 minute, and then I'm going to end the panel as I always do with rapid fire questions. But Debbie, is it my responsibility as a comic book professional to insert morality or ethics into my work?
Great question. I'm going to first, I'd love to just chime in on the last question that we just had the opportunity, and I just want to say to all of you, you all really give me hope in regards to like my community, the American Muslim community, actually being able to forge a career in comic book writing. The whole impetus of the 99 was basically because there was no Muslim experience. And so my friend decided that he needed to create that experience. And lo and behold, his seed idea went from this small thing to this huge thing that now there's a TV series that people could buy the videos, you can watch them on Netflix, etc. And then, the immersion of DC Comics and Marvel coming together and bringing all of these superheroes together to basically save the world is really incredible. So I hope that in the future there will be more American Muslims who will actually be able to become comic book writers and really contribute, because there's so much that we can all give, especially based on the point that you made, the immigrant experience. We all bring something to the table from our culture and history. So that's really, really amazing. What was the question? I'm sorry. Sunday morning.
That's quite all right. So the question is, do I have a responsibility as a comic book professional to insert ethics or morality into my work? 30 seconds.
Okay. I would say yes and no. I would prefer being able to actually incorporate human values, where that way each and every person, whether they're a person of faith or no faith, whatever they aspire to, can feel a sense of connectedness to their humanity. So if you are able to actually, incorporate it in that way, I think that would be incredible.
That's a great answer. I'm going to end with rapid fire questions, and for this, I'm actually going to put the microphone down because we got to go very quickly and let Danny and Ari take over this dance. We're going to go down the row. Ready? Debbie first. Favorite hero?
Wonder Woman and Ms. Marvel.
Woo! Favorite villain? Darren.
Galactus.
Ooh. Carrie, person who inspired you to be religious.
My Holocaust survivor mother.
The first comic you read? Sholly.
Justice League of America number 62.
Debbie, person who gave you your first comic.
My neighbor, Debbie Clark.
Darren, first person to confiscate your comic books.
Nobody has ever confiscated.
The Muhammad Ali of comic books, my friend.
You've heard people say, "Oh, my mother threw them out."
Let's talk about our yeshiva rabbis.
I was going to get there, actually. Carrie, favorite comic book of all time?
The Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, Terry Austin run on Detective.
Yes. Yes. Sholly, who thinks it's not too late for you to go to law school?
Everybody knows.
Debbie, if there were a blessing on reading a comic book, what would it be?
Hallelujah.
Darren, if there were a blessing on discovering in your grandpa's basement a mint edition copy of Action Comics #1, what would it be?
Wow, thank God.
Carrie, greatest misunderstanding about the faith of the person sitting all the way to your left.
The greatest misunderstanding?
Yes.
That is an excellent question. I'm completely unprepared.
We'll continue that question online. Sholly Fisch,
Second edition.
most egregious misrepresentation of faith in comics.
Oh my God, there's so many.
That's the answer. Debbie, most inspiring representation of faith in comics.
Wonder Woman.
Darren, secret religious crush. Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, or the Huntress, Helena Bertinelli.
The Huntress.
Okay, Rob Carey. Linda Carter or Gal Gadot?
Oh, please.
Linda Carter.
He keeps reading my question.
I'm related to Linda Carter.
Did I get her phone number?
That's my guess.
Sholly, name of the figure of faith that would pretty much stink to be.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about having Linda Carter's phone.
Okay, so I'll ask you a different question, so we got to wrap up. Favorite rabbi? Ben Stiller is Jacob Schramm in Keeping the Faith. Gene Wilder is Opera for the Frisco Kid, or Barbara Streisand is Yentl.
Wow, Frisco Kid, easy.
Yeah. Excellent. And Debbie, religious-themed cosplay costume you hoped to see at Jewish ComicCon?
Oh, Lord.
That would be it.
Thank you to Jewish ComicCon for hosting Heroes of Faith. This is Gorf at JewishCartoon.com. We'll continue the discussion online and on Twitter, on Facebook. Wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and an early happy holidays.
Thank you very, very much. There is certainly hope in the world when you can start a morning off with Shachris and Congregation Kol Israel, and then go on to this incredible discussion of Heroes in Faith. I want to thank all our panelists. Gorf, it's really great to meet you after being on the radio the other day with you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Everybody, please hang around about 5 minutes. We're going to start our next discussion. It'll be featuring a whole bunch of awesome dudes: Ari Chaplain, Danny Fingerov, Julian Volage, and more people. If I can